to the session. So again, of course, you've been here earlier in that in Mediator experiences, but please, you'll have to again tell us about yourself, and because it's a fresh show, fresh introduction. So you want to tell us about yourself, and then take it from there.
Okay, I'll do it very short. I'll try to do it very short. Again, I'm Tsisana Shamlikashvili. I'm mediator as my, at least for today, it's my final profession. And I'm from Russia. At least what I did as my mission regarding mediation, it was Russia, first of all. And of course, I'm an international mediator, and I do lots of commercial international cases. At the same time, Russia was one of the main maybe pains for me, and that's why I started to do mediation and to develop and implement mediation in Russia. So at the same time, we see what is happening now. And so I would say that we didn't succeed so much with mediation in Russia. I have to be honest and sincere with you, but it's a very short period of time, and for mediation, you have to be very consistent and patient to get some results. And today, still, I can say that, and probably the topic of our today's conversation is regarding culture of mediation and mediators' mindset or mediation mindset, I would say. But just to conclude with my introduction, I have I'm wearing many hats, and I have several backgrounds, like I'm a neurologist from my first profession, I'm a psychologist, lawyer, and finally mediator. And I created a lot of different kind of even institutional basis for implementing mediation, especially in Russia. Like we established a professional mediators organization, which is NGO, and one of my first organizations about mediation was Center for Mediation and Law, and I was editing a magazine about mediation. And we helped publishing house, and we created special library for mediators, for Russian-speaking mediators. And it's also probably very important to know that when we worked not only for Russia, but almost for all former Soviet Union and for all Russian-speaking world. And in 2010, we managed to adopt mediation law, federal law, which became the framework law for implementing mediation. But if you don't have questions, and what I want to say is that I am really very grateful for this invitation, and I can say that Vikram is doing really great work, trying to put together and to make us listen to each other, because mediators have to listen to each other as well. And we have a lot of maybe to discuss and to maintain this dialogue and this ability to be in dialogue even virtually, and this platform which Vikram created, and for instance this conference, and Ken, whom gave this keynote speech on his birthday, which is also very significant and symbolic. And we have to hope that maybe in the future, and that's what probably I wanted to emphasize in what I'm going to talk about today, that maybe mediation will become more not only visible, but really used and really accepted and embraced by our societies and our community. So,
and that is where I think, Tsisana, the mediator mindset and finding people with the mediator mindset is what we have to do. But of course, today it is culture and the mediator mindset. So please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so what I wanted to talk about that, of course, we are living in the world, and everything what we are doing has to have some kind of application to our lives and to our world. And when I started mediation, it was my deep belief, and it was my main goal to implement mediation in the society. This was one of my main tasks, which I saw as very important, not only in Russia, but all over the world. And what we see today in our world, the world becomes really very small, very little. Yes, and we have a lot of hatred we have in the world, but we have much more fear in the world. And we have a lot of uncertainty in the world. And all of these feelings, which people are experiencing, most of them, they probably one of the most used sometimes mechanisms to cope with this, it's attacking sometimes, and this all makes us feel not only very uncertain, but also very insecure. And when we are saying, we're trying, of course, it was a lot of effort and a lot of success also after Second World War, and a lot of institutions, international institutions was created, established to deal with this kind of difficulties which are part of our lives. But today we can see, if we will be honest with ourselves, that most of these institutions, they show that they are not able to deal anymore, at least with the mechanisms which they traditionally used to deal with the problems like this. Today, they are unable, and war in Ukraine shows us that if, for instance, at World War II, someone could say that there was no information, that people didn't know what is going on. And that's why what happened, it happened. But today we are almost witnessing through monitors of our TVs, our laptops, what is going on, this terrible violence. And you see, it's more than today, it's exactly 3 months since the war in Ukraine started. And nobody stopped it. Every minute people are dying there. So it means that we have to be very realistic, that we have to change something, and not like, we don't want, it's not about political correctness, it's about our survival. And we have to be honest that we have to change something, and maybe in very radical way. And when I'm saying that the world became small, it's really small, because in previous times, in ancient times, even 100 years ago, people used to live in their communities, and they didn't have weapons like we have now. And even if there was some violence, this was kind of local violence. And if there was a war, there was no such a threat like we have today, that one maybe mentally disturbed person or very angry and insulted person can threat all the world. And the main thing what we have to think now, what we can do that we won't be threatened like this. And maybe this seems very idealistic, but at the same time, we have to think about this, that each of us, if we want to survive, we have to think about the ways how we have to deal with world, with each other, and with ourselves, just to develop for ourselves mechanisms, coping mechanisms, because all these emotions will stay. We are human beings and we live in the world which is changing every second. But we have to cope with this in some different way. And it's not only about kind of, to be nice to someone. No, not at all. It should be already understood by people that it's very pragmatic to use mediation. For instance, when we talk about culture of mediation, what we mean? Is it principles, rules, ethical code, which creates this, yes, so special, safe environment, providing effect of mediation when parties can, in safe environment, resolve their disputes? When we talk about culture of mediation, is it ability, custom, tradition, existing already in the society, community group, to solve and prevent disagreements, pursuing mediation, the way to deal with the dispute? Or when we talk about culture of mediation, is it way to interact with the world, with each other and oneself, also based on values of and principles of mediation? But in any of these contexts, we and concepts, we have to rely on mediative mindset. Otherwise, you can't achieve all this. That's why when we discussed about the topic, I think that culture of mediation, it could not be developed, it could not be implemented, it could not grow, if you want. It could not be cultivated without mindset which is responding to this culture. Culture and mindset are very much interactive. And especially in nowadays, when we are talking about mediation, and of course, this notion of mediation was from, at least in Middle Ages, they used the word mediation. But mediation, which experienced the Renaissance, from my point of view, at least from the 40s of 20th century in the United States, it was already, and it is already, a new kind of method to approach, to deal with the conflict, to address the conflict, where one of the main features, or main key feature is real empowerment of the parties. Real empowerment where each voice will be heard and will be respected. And it's very complicated even to imagine that in our world it will be possible. Even in our small world, when we are doing just mediation for parties, it's not so easy to achieve this, that all voices will be heard. And in the world, it's really necessary. Because, and we already had this in not in recent history. For instance, maybe you heard about, and you know for sure, about this terrible terrorist act, for instance, in Norway, in Oslo, when Breivik killed more than 90 people. And okay, we can say that, but all the psychiatric expertises, they proved that he was not mentally disturbed, that he was, that his psyche is okay. So probably this kind of people, they have something probably to say to the world. But the world is resisting and doesn't want to listen to them. And then when world doesn't listen, the only voice what they can use, it's a gun, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So I can't say that mediation can be panacea, no. But from the other point of view, if the social tissue, I mean, our societal interactions will be embroidered by mediation and mediative mindset, and then mediation culture will be the main culture which will be accepted by the society, then maybe we will live in more safe world. You know, Claude Lévi-Strauss, the French-Belgian anthropologist, and he was one of the key persons for the theory of structuralism and structural anthropology. He used to say, at least this phrase is attributed to him, that if 21st century should be century of humanitarian science. If it won't be like this, then 21st century won't be, so the humanity won't survive. So probably mediation, and I want to stress it again, because some people, they think, first of all, that mediation is something just to make it nicer and it's very ideal to be the reality, and that it's something like we are trying to say like fairy tales for these solid, serious people who are doing very solid, serious business, you know. But at the same time, if but some of these people, they don't want mediation, and they have a lot of power. But this is the question of the average people, citizens, who really want that their world will be the world still place where they can live in secure way, maintaining their freedoms, which are diminishing from day to day and are oppressed because the most of the society is in huge fear from different kind of aspects. And the average people, they have to think about this, that mindset which should be cultivated in our societies can help us to, maybe I don't want these pathetic words, but at the same time to really save our world. And the question, for instance, when our children are growing up and they are intending to have children, you know, sometimes this terrible thought is coming to our minds. What kind of world we are leaving to our grandchildren? What promises we can give them? What security what we can provide them? And this is, if we will think about this a little bit more deeper, this is terrible, because this means that we are at real crisis. We are all talking about crisis, but we have to realize not only to be in panic, in kind of history, but we have to understand. And the problem is that today it's not like that it can happen in overnight. We have to be prepared for very hard, for very consistent, very persistent work, patient, and we have to be prepared already as well for great resistance. And we see this resistance even for us ourselves when we professional mediators, we are trying to just to implement mediation in the fields where it's obvious that mediation should be implemented. And just a few days ago, I received from my colleagues from Mediators, from ADR community, but doing online dispute resolution, that we have to foresee in near future ODR, online dispute resolution wars because still till today, for instance, online dispute resolution in most of the courts where it was implemented, it has a lot of success, but it's used for small claims. But as soon as it will reach the range and the level of the cases, which will threat the incomes of the lawyers, then there will be real resistance. And with the same, we can anticipate in all kinds of fields. And what is one of the main things what we have to think about? To implement mediation already in young generation, with kids, with children, that they will grow up already, because we are talking a lot about empathy, we are talking a lot about compassion, but how much empathy and compassion do we have in the world? You know, these are all very nice expressions, that love is everything, that we have to spread love all over the world. It's not possible. I think so. You know, we can't love everyone. And we don't need to be loved by everyone. But we have to respect everyone's right for existence, you know. And this is one of the main things. When I started mediation in very early 2000s, and I started one of my first works was about school mediation. One of the main goals was just to create something which will give people understanding that they live in the world where each human life, I'm trying to be very realistic about this, that we are talking maybe mostly from a Western point of view. I can say that maybe I don't know so much about Indian culture, and it's very rich culture and very, very, very different kind of cultures. But there are some cultures maybe where the human being's life is not one single human being's life. But for us, I'm sure that one human being's life is always the most precious and valuable thing. But it's not about the human being's life who is my inner circle or the strangers. I want to live in the world when my worst enemy's life will be as valuable as my closest friend's life. This is the world where we can feel safe. But probably this is very difficult to achieve it, but at least to have this task in our mind, this will be very important. And probably for mediation, at least from my point of view, mediation mindset is about this. And another aspect, which is also very important, it's about freedom. Freedom and relativity of freedom. That my freedom ends up where the freedom of the other person starts. And I'm free as long as I don't compromise the freedom of the other. And these are maybe very trivial things, very simple things, very obvious things. But at the same time, most of them are lost in today's life. And what is my maybe thinking and what I want to at least to articulate it and maybe find the way that people will think about this, and maybe we will have some dialogue, discussion about it, because this is whole very complicated thing. And as today, the most of the world becomes more separated, more fragmented, mediation can be this instrument which helps to integrate. Even if we will look through the lens of our one mediation procedure, when we have these divided, confronting parties, what we are trying to help them to get, we are trying to get them to some kind of consensus. Most of the times, we have to be also honest about this. Most of the times, it's still compromise, but it's consensus compromise. But it's kind of new meaning which integrated their maybe completely confronting positions, and which integrated their core interests and values and needs. And so what we need in today's world, we need this kind of culture. We need new institutions, or we need to transform existing institutions. Or we have to implement new mechanisms in existing institutions, where culture based on mediation principles, on mediation values, on this mindset, that it will be implemented and that it will be used, and not only used when it's already too late. But Vikram, maybe you want to give me a question, because I can talk for...
No, it's nice listening to you, but I'll tell you, because you said the topic, you said culture and the mediator mindset, and from there I'm looking at you telling us that the mediator mindset obviously exists. I mean, exists everywhere, Russia itself also, all over. But over time, how does the culture that develops in a place, how does that start affecting the mediator mindset, and where does that take it?
You mean how, what? Do you mean how the culture of mediation culture, or culture where mediation is implemented, how culture influences the mediator's mindset?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. This is very interesting question, you know. And this is something which is very challenging for mediators. Because, as I said, one of the main features of mediation is empowerment. Of course, mediators should be as much as possible neutral and unbiased. And he has to follow these main principles, which are like keys for the mediation practice and mediator's mindset. But this is one of the main challenges, and also it says about professional quality of mediator, that he is able to resist maybe culture which is completely or in some way opposite to the mediation values, mediation philosophy. For this mediator, first of all, he has to understand very well philosophy of mediation. He has to understand the substance of mediation. And his mindset has to be very, very healthy. His mindset has to be, it's not that he has to be, staying in this glass crystal box, not seeing anything and saying, okay, I'm a mediator and I'm going to just follow the way, like, no, but he has to deal with this challenging environment, but at the same time being so strong to resist it and to protect and defend the values which makes mediation what it is.
Because
and,
the way, yeah, please.
Excuse me?
No, please. I cut you off. You were saying something.
No, but in Russia, for instance, first of all, starting to implement mediation was a big challenge. Because at the moment when I started, there was it's in many societies like this at some extent. But in Russia, there are some kind of waves of fashion trends. For instance, at the moment when we started mediation, there was a huge, kind of campaign for purity of Russian language and not using terminology from other languages and so on. So mediation was seen like something which was again imposed from United States, from Anglo-Saxon folk culture. This was one thing. But for us, mediation was very important to distinguish, as I said in our previous discussion, to distinguish it from the other non-formal, but at the same, existing in Russia criminal ways to resolve the conflicts. And at the same time, when we started mediation, it was some people wanted to have mediation only as a tool to deal with commercial conflicts, because they saw that they saw the experience which, for instance, United States had. They wanted to make another industry for gaining money, which is not bad, but still, and that's why one of the first, not one of them, but first draft of the law called for conciliation and mediation was about, was completely like law from UNICETRAL, but it didn't respond for the task which we had in the society to have mediation as a tool which you can use in different arenas and different fields. So this was also something what we had to resist and which we had to overcome. Then there was another challenge, that you don't have any mediation practice, or it's very, very seldom that someone uses mediation. And it's very complicated to draft the law about something which does not exist. And most of the countries, and it was the period exactly when the European Union had to implement mediation laws following the directive of EU about mediation. And most of these countries, and some of them, they still don't have laws, to tell you the truth. But most of these countries, they had at least for decade, they had experience and practice of mediation. And we didn't have this practice. We had some fragmentary practice of mediation, but we had to draft the law for the society. And why we had to do it? Because if we wouldn't have law, we won't be able to implement mediation. It's like a vicious circle, you know. It's not like in most of democratic countries where from down, from the ground, something starts, it becomes accepted, or it dies, or it's growing, it's developing, and then it becomes mature enough to have the law, to have special legislation. In Russia, it wasn't the case, because you can't you can't implement mediation without involvement of legal society, and especially judges, because judges, they are one of the main gatekeepers. And if maybe you know, that Russia is very, Russia has had at this time, it was more than 27 million cases every year in the courts for the society of 140 million citizens. And it, it means that each fifth person had some connection with the court during the year. It's terrible. And to approach this society, to persuade this society to use something different than court, because everyone was unhappy with the court, everyone was blaming the court, but at the same time, everyone was going to the court. So we needed judges, and judges, they resist. They don't want to take part in something which is illegal from their point of view. So we had to have at place the law, which can give them the formal base to be involved in such kind. Even most open-minded judges who were completely loyal to mediation, you know. And also, this happens in most of the fields, and very often you can see it in the world, that the effort, even very good ideas, they transform or they deviate in the way where the cash flow, where the financial part goes, where the funding goes, you know. For instance, in ODR, in online dispute resolution, which is a very good idea, which is really necessary, but at the same time, as soon as there was no so much funding for ODR, which was from the very beginning seen as a tool for real easy access to informal justice for the citizens, for the population. Afterwards, we see today that ODR is mostly developed in the courts. Why? Because courts started to fund their programs for online dispute resolution. And now you have very few really accepted and working online dispute resolution platforms for the population, but in the court they have. And it's the same thing. And this is also why I started to talk about this. This is big challenge, especially for mediators all over the world, and especially in the countries like Russia, for instance, because in Russia, many mediators, they really wanted to be helpful, operational for implementing mediation. They can't live from mediation, but they have to survive from something. And this is also a big, attempt to temptation for them, when they get some funding and then someone says, for instance, one of the biggest banks in Russia, I won't say the name, they wanted to create the platform and to have mediation. They said that they want mediation to be the key of this platform, where they will be dealing with their clients and where they will provide to their clients services of dispute resolution with their counterparties and also with their clients. And most of these cases was supposed to be about the credit, loans, and financial instruments. And we had long discussions about this. And I felt that there is something wrong about this, because I said that mediation, it's not about imposing something. Mediation is where they have their free will. And from the very beginning, we are already in the situation when we have, as one party, we have huge bank, powerful bank, and on the other side, we have the counterpart. And so in this case, okay, if we try to diminish the negative impact of this, but we have to provide as much as possible support to the client, that he will be able to express his will and he will be able to participate in whole capacity and find the solution which is acceptable for him in reality, not only like the bank will be. But finally, I just stepped out of this project because I said, this what you are saying, it's not mediation. You want to call it mediation just to attract someone's maybe attention, or but it's not mediation. And for me, it was impossible to take part in this. But someone probably will go because there was some kind of maybe promise of funding. And we can't judge people with this, but that's very bad for mediation, and that's what creates a lot of dangers for mediation. And so, if in the society the critical mass of people is so that it's not so huge, and especially when it's new, when the potential user, he does not have real guidance, real understanding. For instance, when you go to the doctor, when you go to stomatologist, to dentist, you know what to expect from him. When you go to the lawyer, you know more or less what you have to expect from him because you have already understanding of his professional profile. But about mediation, most of the people, they don't know. Only one thing, how they can judge it, they can say, oh, it was interesting and it helped me, or I didn't like it And it is the same thing, like I have to use some corrupted system or some system which does not give me the result which helps me to have better future. So these are the challenges which mediators' mindset will be also always, and we have to be very, very, attentive to this, because it's very easy to become hostage of these things. And then, for instance, today in Russia, there are people who are using, and even school mediation, the method which I invented, I developed. And afterwards, when we spent a lot of energy, we did a lot of investment in all this, but Russia is huge. Can you imagine on this territory how many schools and everything? But at the moment when there was already question of funding, completely different people appeared. And they wanted to do it like, kind of conciliation in the schools, kind of peace building. And it's not about peace building. It's not only about, it's very good to solve the conflict when it arises and just to have some tools to deal with it in better way. But first of all, you can't achieve it if it's not already in the culture and mindset of this community. This is first thing. And our goal was to even to cultivate it in the culture of the school on different levels. You can't say that there is mediative mindset, for instance, for kids, for pupils, for students, without changing the attitudes of the adults. First of all, teachers and parents as well. Because if kids, they live, or it's like our children, when we grow up our children, we have to, we grow them, first of all, by our model. We show that we are role models for them. And we have to walk our talk. But if you teach children in one mindset, you say them something, but afterwards you behave completely different, what kind of result you will get in this case? So that's why sometimes this fight was very complicated. And again, I hope that I responded to your question, that mindset, it's under the great influence of traditional culture of the society. But at the same time, we have to remember that we mediators, we are educators. And as much mediation is developed and implemented, so we can educate, and then we can try to change the culture itself. But it takes generations. It won't happen in overnight. It won't happen even in one generation. It has to be very consistent effort.
Well, Tsisana, but how I'm looking at it is that in terms of that mindset, you have a adversarial system that was given by the colonizer all over the world, this adversarial system. So how much did that affect the mediator mindset, or did that mediator mindset just back off? But it's always there. I mean, basically the idea is to question or discuss, does that mindset over time, does it get finished from society as the adversarial system is the one that is used, or that mediator mindset is dormant and we have to take it out? Because even say the Russian experience, supposing we go down to some villages in Russia, and we find out that who are those people with that mediator mindset. Will we be able to identify people, or over the years, those people, because they were not valued, do they not exist, or they're dormant? What That's the kind of discussion that I really wanted to also have. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, since I started to be involved in mediation, I had this kind of hypothesis that 25% of people, of population of the world, there are people who are born already with this, kind of, they are ready for cultivating mediation mindset. 25% of people will never become, immersed, and we will never be able to live in, maybe this is very radical, but I can say that this part of people, they are always very adversarial and so on. And this 50% which is left, they are always, you can always teach them. You can always explain them. And that's why I'm saying that that's very important to understand. And why I said about Claude Lévi-Strauss, because he was structuralist. And most of our world was based on this social, instruments, social institutions, which were built to make our lives possible and to make our lives more civilized. And today it's a time, and you are asking regarding adversarial attitude, and that adversarial, I think that many things, because most of the values, which was at least from the time of French Revolution, like freedom, equality, friendship, they became mostly slogans. They lost their meaning. They lost their true meaning. But at the same time, most of the things which we see today and which are done today, they are done with these slogans still, that we have this kind of trick. And the problem is that our societies and the people, they became very lazy. They became mentally lazy. They became spiritually and soully lazy. And from one side, we can't blame them, people, because, the life from one side, it became very tense. We have a lot of information. We are living in the world where the real world and virtual world is mixed up. And even living in the real world, you can't be always sure that what you get in real world, that it's real, because it's full of false and fake. And sometimes people, even in democracies, we know it, in most of the democracies, people, they are most of the people, they say, I am not involved in any politics. I'm not interested in the politics. And there was one of the greatest journalists of the beginning of 20th century, Walter Lippmann. And in between First World War and Second World War, in 1922 or 24, he published his book, Public Opinion. And in this book, there was his main concern about that media and information flow will kill the democracy. And to tell you the truth, he was one of the first who used, not in psychological, not in psychiatric, not in this health system, but he used in journalism, he used empathy in his book as a notion. And you know what? And unfortunately, he was right, that most of the people, they sit on their sofas and they are consuming all this information, which is information helping only to wash their brains and which is guiding them the way which is needed to someone else, but not for them. And this is hugest problem of our societies, because we lost ability for independent thinking. We lost ability to doubt. You know, as soon as you have this always question, is it real? Is it right? Is it truth? But we have to be sure that there is no truth at all, because truth, it has so many shades. And critical thinking, which is needed very much. Even people who are policymakers, they don't make this effort to see the problem, at least the problem with which they are dealing, with which they are, with what they are responsible for, to see it from different angles.
Mhm.
You know, because they have to do so. Because to take the right decision, if you want to take the right decision, if it's in some way corrupted, lobbied decision, it's another thing, and it's another question. But if you want to take the right decision and you honestly want to do it in qualified way, then you have to see as much as possible, have to deep and panoramic view on the problem which you are dealing with. And just to say about, you know what, many things which we have inherited from, for instance, last century till today, have to be thought and have to be seen from different ways. For instance, we are talking all the way about this difference in the society, that richer become richer and poor, they become poorer, and this division gets bigger and bigger. But at the same time, we always, when we read books about economy, when we read something about entrepreneurship, we see that entrepreneur and businessman, his main goal is just to have as much as possible income without looking at what expense this income comes. Yes? I'm not socialist at all, no. And but today, really, this is big problem. And if we will continue, I'm not economist, but at the same time, if we will continue to look at the business, to the commerce, in the way that it should be only for income, so we have to find some ways for more, responsible entrepreneurship. There is a lot of, trends about this, like social business, social entrepreneurship and things like this. But it has to be changed in the core, the understanding. The same regarding adversarial. Adversarial when you look at some maybe advertisement regarding trainings, or how people they for instance learn their children that they have to be leaders. Yes, they have to be leaders, but leaders, you know, it's not always when I say to my grandchildren, their boys, that they have to explain if they have a conflict with someone, they don't have to beat it immediately someone. They have to try to find some kind of understanding with the person. But you know what? And it's not about leadership. Leadership can be also from intelligence and to be smart. And it's the leadership which we need today. So question of adversarial, you know, competition is necessary. It's a part of our life, it's part of our society, and it's very important part which fuels the progress of our society and the life. But at the same time, what extent, at which level the adversarial attitude has to be. Because sometimes we are fighting already, forgetting for why we started this struggle and for what we are fighting, what we want to get as a result. Like Russians, they used to say, okay, I will fight till the last drop of the blood. And then you ask, whose blood? It can be his own blood also, you know. And people have to understand that, of course, there was a very distinguished and very deep philosopher. He was from Georgian origin in Soviet Union times, Mamardashvili. He was writing also in French, but in Russian mostly. And he had very good expression that, you know, to be a human, it's not something that you get, that you are human always. Each moment you have to prove that you are human. And if we live with this, because every moment of our life we take decisions. We decide each moment. And it's up to us what will be our decision. And what quality will be of this decision, it's based on our mindset and how we behave in the world.
But I think also what you said about the entrepreneurship as to whether the entrepreneurs are only going to be looking at profits and income, or should they have a larger thought. Similarly, when dispute resolution, when you talk about rights-based and now interest-based, that also has to move towards value-based. So value-based negotiations also have to be something that people have to start looking at, as values also being something which society, obviously, look, that also keeps changing. I'm not saying that there is a certain value that society has about things, but there are some core values. I think that those core values are the ones we need to focus on in every aspect. So it's be it dispute resolution, be it entrepreneurship, I mean, everywhere. I think those core values should not go. But tell me something that you've seen the former Soviet Union and you've seen it break up. In terms of the mediator mindset, do you see some change that has happened in Russian society from that perspective?
No, you know what, having this what we have today, I can say that first of all, you know, the problem, one of the biggest problems of Russian society, and it's from ancient times, which is historical, that, and I didn't believe it, to tell you the truth. When I started mediation, many people tried to persuade me to not to do it in Russia. really very high-ranking judges, they used to say to me, "Why are you putting yourself in such a difficult position? You will be very much disappointed. Mediation is very good, but it's not good for Russia. It won't work in Russia." But I didn't believe in it, and I still don't believe, because it was a very short period of time. We didn't have time to work enough. But at the same time, why is this, why these people, they are so insistent in this belief that it's not good, it won't work in Russia? I think because, for instance, 9 years since 1989, when Berlin Wall was demolished, and till somewhere 1997, it was years of real, it was terrible years in Russia, because it was a lot of crime. Every day you had in news at least 2-3 people killed from the political establishment and so on. So it was like very complicated time. Probably it was like in United States in somewhere at the end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century. But at the same time, it was a lot of hope. It was real freedom of speech, at least for the first 5-6 years. And there was a lot of possibilities. But at the same time, Russian people, most of the time, they were looking for the strong hand. And they looked always for the master, They're looking for the master. For instance, why should I look for the master? I'm master of myself.
No, but interesting. This is Tsisana, what you just said. That is where that connection of culture and mediator mindset comes in. That when society is looking for a master, looking for someone to tell them what to do, and when that society gets conditioned in that way, then the whole concept of that mediator mindset slowly can just disappear. You just become conditioned to just accept what is given to you.
Yes, or you have to work very hard, and you have to have this time to work from generation to generation, and to break this, ice, and to work on the society or from grassroots level, hoping that, and I still hope that it will be, because most of the, there was a very good, wisdom that the bear was in the voliere, in the cage. And afterwards, someone opened the cage and the bear came out of the cage. And he continued to walk the same perimeter like cage, because it's already your mindset, you're part of your mindset that you are in the cage. So that's what gives me hope that these people, they lived for a long time with this, mindset that they were looking for the strong hand, for master, for someone who will decide for them, who will judge for them. But as soon as because there is still, I know a lot of people from former Soviet Union, not only from Russia, but from former Soviet Union, who live all over the world. and who are supporting Putin now.
Mhm.
Can you understand it? Can you imagine this? For me, it's every time it's shocking, but it's like this. But there is a lot of people, foreigners, also people from the countries, from different countries who still support Putin. But what I want to say, but many Russian people, for instance, when they immigrate from Russia, when they settle somewhere else, they live in different cultures, in democratic cultures, and they are okay there. So it means that there is possibility, first maybe to learn, then maybe it will become the natural part of the mindset, natural part of the culture.
Because this aspect, this discussion, of course, my focus definitely is on colonization for sure. That has colonization affected the mindset to the extent that has that whole concept of mediation mindset and mediator mindset, how much have they got affected? Only because if we have to undo things, how much undoing do we have to do? Because it's hundreds of years of conditioning that someone will decide for you. Courts is where dispute resolution happens. That kind of whole mindset that is developed. So, I mean, of course, for me, like you said, grassroots is where I have to. That's my focus now. That from every village, down to the village level, those people with that mediator mindset. First of all, do they exist? Well, I feel they exist, but that's what we have to find out from each culture. What is happening in some part of Russia, because Russia is also huge, India is huge. So what is really happening in each part? We have to really see how much has got affected, how much work we have to do. So I think that for me, that's why that culture and mediator mindset, that's why for me it was really something which was connected, which we were looking at to discuss.
And probably, you know what, as I said, I think that at least maybe approximately I'm right that 20-25% of people, they are born already with this mediator's nature. But like we all know that children are very natural in all their expressions, behavior, and afterwards we human beings lose it.
Mhm.
So, but at the same time, what I want to say that today we have to look at it a little bit differently. Of course, we have to help people who are already with this mindset to be visible and to bring this into the society and to help the society also to cultivate this. But at the same time, one of the main things is to learn society, to live in this attitude to the world. Because some people, they say, okay, it's not possible, but you know what, even for Russia, there is very good concept of nudge, you know, nudge.
Mhm.
And for Russia, for instance, mediation, if, for instance, Putin would be just exchanged, at least after at least last time, then maybe all what happened now, it won't be possible because, you know, now he has this hubris syndrome for sure. And now everything got in real disaster. But when you teach people and you have to do this nudge, you have to push a little bit. You have to give, maybe you remember that Erickson, he used to say, you don't have to hold the hand of the child, of the person and just guide him and take him. No, you have to keep the hand on his shoulder, that he will feel that you are backing him. And sometimes when he's deviating from the right way, you can just correct it. You know, mediation for me in Russia was the way which could even prevent, if we would have a little bit more time, maybe on the 20, first of all, on the 2014, it won't be support for annexation of Crimea, you know, because now even people who are against war in Ukraine today, they were supporting the annexation of Crimea.
Mhm.
So
But
this is
no,
yes.
please. No, please finish. You were saying something.
No, this is very complicated, you know, and for me, it's very disappointing that all efforts what was done today is mostly ruined because people there, first of all, Russian society is very much traumatized. It was traumatized for centuries, and then 20th century with revolution, with the war, with Stalin's terror, everything was, it wasn't helping to recover. But now it's a new trauma, you know. And when we are saying, for instance, just this morning, I heard the report from one of our Russian singers, who is very, you know, like he is protesting all this. And in one of the provinces in Russia, he had a whole concert hall where 3,000 people was sitting just a few days ago. And he said that he asked them to raise the hand who is for the war, who is supporting the war. Nobody rose hand. Can you imagine? It was 3,000 people. But when we are listening for the reports from social studies, they're saying that it's more than 77% of support. Of course, there is a fear, but at the same time, if all these people would be able to come outside, not these single people who are immediately are taken to the jail.
But because Tsisana, let me tell you, you're saying people should come out and whatever. But when I look at the elections, most countries, I mean Russia also, if you look at statistics, I'm sure you'll find the same thing, that people are not coming out to vote. And if people don't come out to vote, then what is that democracy that you're talking about? Who are those people who are leading the country in various countries? I'm not even saying Russia, you'll have to look at the statistics, but I'm sure you'll find that there also, that the percentage of votes of the entire country, the person who wins the elections has a minority of that. They don't have the majority. I was looking at the statistics in the US, 33% of the votes of the country, and you are leading the country there. In India, it's 25% of the entire votes of the country. Russia, I was just looking at some statistics here, which said only 51% of the people went and voted. And out of 50%, if you get 50% of the votes, you only got 25% of the people's votes. So I think we have to start concentrating on that, and we have to bring, if we have to call it a democracy, then people have to be involved in it. And if they're not involved in it, what they get as an end result, they have asked for it. They have done it to themselves. So I think we have to start questioning that part also.
Like there is saying that each nation gets the leadership which it deserves, you know. And what I said before, that yes, people, they became very lazy, you know. And that's why I'm saying that people have to be more active. It doesn't mean that everyone has to become politician, but they have to be interested, because after war, 2-3 decades, people were so tired from what they went through, and they were so happy, and they wanted to give their people, their children, better life, better future. But these children already, this generation, they are so much used to this comfort, you know, that they don't want, and they even don't have in mind that everything needs work. Like in our family relations, we have to work on them, yes? It's not for granted. We have to put an effort on it. The same thing is in our societal life. We have to work on it. But if you are working somewhere, you know, it's such a terrible feeling when you are going somewhere, or you have your group of people where you work, your subordinates, or your, and you can't say what you think. This is terrible.
But now you have Jasmine here. She's a student, so you can ask a student what the young people are thinking like. So any message for her also, if you have something to tell her. These students obviously must be looking at things differently. So Susanna, something for Jasmine?
Excuse me?
As a student, she's a student of law. What message do you have for her, and what do you want her to do?
And from where she is?
She's from India.
But she's from India. What is the message? She's a student of law?
Yeah.
Of law. You know, what I would say is that law and legal profession, I think it won't disappear in any case. It's very important that we have laws. And but at the same time, for the law students, and we did a lot of work on it. We had mediative clinic. We taught students in best Moscow law schools, for instance, for mediation. And what I would say for the young lawyers and future lawyers, that they have to look at their profession, because probably in most of the schools still, in some already they are changing this culture of teaching and changing the culture of, they're changing the value of the profession. Because the law student and the legal professional, like every professional, like doctor, like teacher, first what he has to do, what is my profession for? And if you answer this question, first of all, you have to think about this very properly. And you have to answer yourself, and probably in my view, that the legal profession exists that to help people to protect their rights, to understand their rights, to understand, and when they are not able, of course, they don't have these qualifications, that there will be professionals who will be able, not only thinking that he knows better because he is legal professional, what his client needs. No, he has to explain his client everything, help him to understand, show him all the spectrum of possibilities and outcomes, and together with him to decide which strategy they have to use to solve this concrete situation. You know, this is probably the main thing, because this is another problem which we are now seeing already very explicitly in the world, the lost focus of the professions, very important, socially important professions, like legal profession, like doctors, like teachers. For instance, doctor, very often, or even nurse, they don't understand that their main goal, task is that they have to give relief to the patient. They have to make what they can to help the patient. But some of them, they just think, if you will ask the lawyer, for instance, we had one student in law school, in one of the most distinguished law schools in Moscow. And he was excellent in all subjects. And he was very ignorant about mediation. He was saying that, oh, mediation is something unserious, cool. And finally, when he came to the exam, and I was at the exam, and I questioned him about mediation, and he said to me, why are you trying to implement it? It's just a nonsense in our society. If I will have a client, I will advise him what kind of false documents he has to create, what he has to do, and I will help him to win the case in the court. And that's what I'm going to do. And we gave him the lowest point, and afterwards all the heads of this law school was begging me to give him 5 because he was an excellent. And due to this, I said to them, you don't have to ask me to do this. You just have to show him the way out of this school, because such kind of lawyer, it's a shame.
Absolutely. But tell me, Tsisana, what about non-lawyers in mediation? Are there enough non-lawyers in mediation there?
Yes. I can't say that it's enough, but first of all, I always support that we have mixture, because it's always very important to have interdisciplinary, because each of them, when you are saying about colonization, I'll be happy to know a little bit more what you understand under this. But what I think that each profession has its own deformation. So it gives the frame, the stereotype in which this professional lives. Even if he is very well qualified and so on. But when you mix this, it's very important. And when they hear, for instance, mediators, lawyers, they hear mediators from management, mediators from psychology, mediators from social field. For them, it's a lot of, insights, and it helps them to widen their horizons, which is very necessary for mediation, because they have to be as much as possible open-minded, and it helps. This is one thing. And another thing, I never thought that mediation should be done only by lawyers. I don't think that the law knowing, you have to be, you have to have some knowledge regarding the law, and it's helpful. But sometimes for lawyers, it's even more complicated to change this attitude, because they are more imposing. They usually, they always know better. They think so. And that's not easy to change this attitude. So, and in mediation, you don't have to be an expert in the case. You just have to help as mediator. That's very important. And also, when we are talking about mediators' mindset, and the mindset which we also need for people and for citizens, for population, if we want them to be more, not only nice to each other, no. Of course, people have to be more friendly to each other. That's why this concept of tolerance, political correctness, all this. But you know what? Sometimes tolerance, political correctness, this creates even much more bigger problems. And what we see, for instance, in the United States, for instance, this movement of anti-racist, but now probably everything is mixed up. And it's very complicated to understand what is going on. Of course, it was terrible that there was a racism, but now I'm afraid sometimes it's opposite racism. And the same thing happens all over the world, you know. Some things are just, you see that everything is upside down, but we are all so similar, but at the same time, we are all so unique, you know. And what I wanted to say is that we were talking about mindset, which can be a score for mediative mindset. We have to, don't laugh at this. It's not, you know, I really think that it's like this, that we have to live with this understanding that we almost know nothing.
Absolutely.
Really.
Absolutely.
Yes. And it helps.
Yeah, totally. But Jasmine had a comment to make. Yeah, Jasmine, what did you want to say?
Excuse me?
I actually know a lot
Jasmine,
of
she wanted to make a comment. Yeah.
No.
She's an enthusiastic is law student. That's why I want her to get involved. She's looking at
Okay, thank
mediation.
you.
So yeah, Jasmine.
I actually know a lot of mediators who were never lawyers and are not lawyers yet. And they are doing great. And actually, not being a lawyer helps with their mediation because they do not see a person any dispute from a point of view of law. They see it as neutrally as possible and look at what the parties actually want and not what they can get if they were in court. So it actually helps, according to them. If they're not a lawyer, they can help better in mediations.
So now what you have to do is you have to put it as a question to Tsisana, because obviously with her experience, it's a question to her. You should put a question. Do they make better, I mean, non-lawyers make better mediators because they are not so entrenched into the law? That's a question, Tsisana. Let's make a comment into a question, because she's too young to make a comment like right now. Let's just say that.
First, I will try to clarify the question if I understood it the right way. So, does it? Did you mean that? Is it better when the mediator is non-lawyer?
Yeah, that's what she's saying.
You know what? I wouldn't say that it's like this. I would say that it's not always that the lawyer is the best mediator and that the lawyers are the best mediators. Mediators can have different backgrounds. It's very important when the mediator is, he has right understanding of his role. And as I said, about what what I would say to the young lawyer or student lawyer, that in any case, it's very important, and especially when lawyer, because the person who has a conflict, usually, when we have a toothache, we go to the dentist, because we know that we have to. The same thing, what happens most often when someone has a conflict, he goes to the lawyer. He won't search mediator from the beginning if he doesn't have an experience with mediator. And if he will get in the hands of the lawyer, it's very important that the lawyer will be qualified, first of all, and that he will be well educated, and he will know about ADR and mediation, and he will be able just to give this kind of possibilities and opportunities to the party to understand what can be the perspectives in different, using the different strategies. But from the point of view, who is better, a lawyer, whose background is better, lawyers, psychologists, there is no, all mediators are very special, you know. And it's very important that if it's lawyer, that he has to put aside his willingness to give an advice if he is a mediator, because it's different. From one point of view, we are talking about lawyer who is a lawyer and the client approaches him as a lawyer. But another thing is if he is getting to the party already as a mediator, but with law background. It's two different positions and it's two different roles.
But I think this is, no, Susan, what you just said, you were asking me about that whole colonization aspect that I was talking about. What you just said, that when a person has a dispute, they will go to a lawyer. This is what is a colonizer's, what they've done to us. And that the courts is where dispute resolution happens and lawyers are the ones who you have to go to. So we have to undo that. But because I'm telling you that this is something not going to happen like in a day or two or something like that. It's going to take years because it's been a conditioning which has happened over the years. But what I was wanting to tell you also, which I keep telling people in terms of having knowledge of law and in mediation, I keep saying that, look, of course, it's not a rights-based process. So obviously you don't have to be entrenched into the matter. And the main thing is that if reasonable people sit together and they are going to look at any kind of solution, that solution would be legal because law has to be reasonable and equitable and just. And if you are sitting in an environment when that kind of discussions are happening, the law will support you. Because if the law doesn't support you in that case, then you will challenge that law, because the law has to be reasonable and fair and equitable and just. And that is what, if people like that, if they are in that kind of a mindset discussing something, so law will not come in the way, according to me. So that's why you really don't need a lawyer. But a lawyer can be brought in as a specialist, like I keep telling people, an architect can be brought in when you want to. You need a technical advice. You get a civil engineer. You get a chartered accountant. Same way, get a lawyer.
Expert.
Yeah, as an expert. So we have to, again, this is a colonizer's mindset. And what has happened is, with mediation being connected with courts, this has become more of a problem now. You have been able to now, what we could have changed as the mindset in terms of the colonization mindset, now we've gone back to that. Again, dispute resolution happens in courts. Mediation will also happen in courts. So that's another undoing that we need to do.
Yes, and it's again regarding what I was trying to say, that we have to change this culture, and only when we change this culture, then people won't go to the lawyer when they have dispute. They will go to mediator, or they will be even able to solve this problem themselves. Because if they will have this mindset, it will be very less escalated disagreements, and it will be less disputes, real disputes, because most of the cases they will be able to catch this at the very beginning and try to understand what is the problem and solve it already at the roots of the conflict. Maybe this sounds very ideal, but it's still possible. It's still really possible, but it needs time.
It's not idealistic, Tsisana, because on my website, I've actually said so. That the best way to resolve your dispute is amongst yourselves. Mediation is your next stage. The first thing you have to be able to do it, and whatever it takes. Negotiation is one thing. Compromise, whatever. Putting your ego aside, all those things.
German, very famous German philosopher, Jürgen Habermas, he wrote that the many fields and many arenas, I'm not quoting, I'm just trying to say the meaning of what he said, that many kind of things which was used to be done in the communities, where people will do it in their personal interactions, now became professions which we are hiring the people and paying them for this, like psychotherapists, like mediators, all these professions. You know, now in the United States, at least, there are people whom you can pay and they will hug you. Yes. So it's crazy, but at the same time, it's like this, you know. And we are losing. That all comes from this laziness, you know, because we are not so much. We want to live only our external life, but we are not paying attention for necessity of our inner life. And this inner life, it's something which feeds our spirit, our soul.
I think the main thing is that people have basic thing, they moved away from conversations. That's the biggest thing. Someone in the US, she got in touch with me and she was telling me all these shows that you do, I really like them because you're having conversations. And here we stopped having conversations. That's
Yes. So I'm afraid our time is over.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Tsisana. Really nice.
Thank
Obviously,
you.
last time also here, also a pleasure talking to you. And please drop into any of the sessions of the conference. The Zoom link is the same. Just whenever you want to. That schedule is out there. I put the schedule out.
Thank you very much.
So
it's
please
very
have a look.
interesting.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
And I wish you a lot of success and thank you very much. Thank you. Have a nice day.